Taylor was born in Iowa. He received his law degree from Drake at Des Moines. He also, for 15 years, he was the city editor of the Des Moines Register and Tribune. Is that right? Good. I'm sorry, Dr. Titovich, but we started. He also practiced law in Des Moines. In 1965, he became the director for the Department of Investigation for the American Medical Association. So without further ado, I would like to introduce to you Dr. Taylor. Mr. Taylor. Mr. Taylor.
Thank you very much, quack fighters. Even on a hot morning, it's fun to be here back on the campus. And I'm sure I would be terribly remiss if I didn't tell you how delighted we are that you people here at Ball State are doing the job you're doing. I think it's unique in the country. I know of no other college or university that gives a for-credit course in health quackery. We're just pleased as can be and are delighted to be here. Before we get started this morning, I'd like to invite you to take a trip with me. It could be a short journey or a long one. We can place our destination anywhere we like on the face of this troubled world. Where we're going is to a theoretical town of 1,000 persons. It's theoretical because it represents the result of a condensation of all of the people of the world proportionately into our town. The resulting picture would look something like this. In this town there would be 60 Americans. The remainder of the world would be represented by 940 persons. This is the proportion of the population of the United States to the population of the world, 60 to 940. The 60 Americans would have half the income of the entire town, with the other 940 dividing the other half. About 330 persons in the town would be classified as Christians. 670 would not. At least 80 townspeople would be practicing communists, and 370 others would be under communist domination. White people would total 303, with 697 non-white. The 60 Americans would have an average life expectancy of 70 years. The other 940, less than 40 years on the average. The 60 Americans would have 15 times as many possessions per person as all of the rest of the people. The Americans would produce 16% of the town's food supply. Although they eat 72% above the maximum requirement, they would either eat most of what they grow or store it for their own future use at exorbitant cost. Since most of the 940 non-Americans in the town would be hungry most of the time, it would create some ill feelings toward the 60 Americans who would appear to be enormously rich and fed to the point of sheer disbelief by the great majority of townspeople. The Americans also would have a disproportionate share of electric power, fuel, steel, and general equipment. Of the 940 non-Americans, 200 would have malaria, and 3 would have leprosy. 45 would die from malaria, cholera, typhus, and other infections. 165 would die from starvation and malnutrition. None of the 60 Americans will ever get these diseases or probably ever be worried about them. Each of the 60 Americans would be spending at least $87 a year for liquor and tobacco, but less than $20 a year for the finest medical care in the world. I wish I were capable of interpolating even further, and I will go another step or two. As we saw in our theoretical town, the 60 Americans would have half the income of the entire town. So the figures would be comparable. Let's use official government figures. Latest available figures place private consumer expenditures for health care at $24.8 billion a year. How much of that, you may wonder, goes to health quacks? The estimates are at best calculated guesses, but the most often quoted figure is $1 billion a year. That figure is used generally by government spokesmen who admit it includes only those quackery schemes in which the United States government has a direct interest. In other words, those involving interstate commerce. We suspect that another $1 billion is spent for worthless health care on an intra-state basis, that is, within a state. At any rate, the monetary cost of quackery far exceeds the entire cost of health education, in addition to the entire cost of all medical research in this country. And one authority in the health field has stated that medical quackery each year costs more lives than all crimes in the United States. It is this cost of life and health that has placed America's physicians in the front line of the war on quacks. It is the insidious side effect of quackery with which medicine concerns itself, the delay in proper medical care that may cost life itself. It is for this reason, too, that the medical profession is dedicated to education of the people about cultism, chiropractic, and the other health sects that turn their backs on scientific medicine. The House of Delegates of the AMA said in 1933, and I quote, "Either the theories and practices of scientific medicine are right, and those of the cultists are wrong, or the theories and practices of the cultists are right, and those of scientific medicine are wrong." And in 1961, the AMA House said, and again I quote, "There can never be a majority party and a minority party in any science." Now, I'm not going to talk about chiropractic this afternoon. This is just a teaser. I hope you'll be here this afternoon when we will get into chiropractic. There's another quote from the proceedings of an AMA convention that I would like to read to you, however, and it is, and again I quote, "Physicians as conservators of the public health are bound to bear emphatic testimony against quackery in all its forms." That quote is from the proceedings of the AMA Clinical Convention in Philadelphia in 1847. From its very inception, 120 years ago, the AMA has been battling quackery, and it is dedicated to a continuation of this warfare against wasting the nation's health and its health care dollar, of fighting fraud at the bedside of ill and desperate people. For as long as there are human beings, there will be human nature and quacks, pretenders to ability they don't possess, to take advantage of the fact. The health quack is not so easy to spot these days. The stovepipe hat and the pitchman talking have gone. In their place are their space-age counterparts, the suave, apparently sophisticated super salesmen with the Madison Avenue manners. These merchants of menace, more insidious and unscrupulous than ever, have many new products, worthless diet fads, worthless food supplements, worthless cosmetic devices, and treatments such as the all-purpose spinal adjustment, worthless cures for everything, even into the area of brain-damaged children and other mental illness. They built the undiscerning, the uninformed, the desperate, the unsuspecting of all ages, of millions and millions of dollars a year, as I said, even in this year of great intellectual enlightenment. I think it's appropriate, before we go any further, that we know what we're talking about. Quackery has been variously defined, but there probably isn't a better definition than that quackery is the pretension or practice of a boastful pretender to skill which he does not possess, especially medical skill. Dorland's Medical Dictionary defines a quack as, quote, "one who fraudulently represents his ability and experience in the diagnosis and treatment of disease or the effects to be achieved by the treatment he offers." Black's Legal Dictionary defines fraudulent as, quote, "a generic term embracing all multifarious means which human ingenuity can devise, which are resorted to by one individual to get advantage over another by false suggestions or by suppression of truth. Thus, a fraudulent act may be a sin of commission or a sin of omission." Quackery exists because the public permits it to exist, in some instances openly fostering its practice and growth. Theories regarding the motives that prompt people to patronize quackery are as numerous as the quacks themselves. Dr. Sinovitz, I believe, is going to try to tell you why people go to quacks before your workshop is over. Most authorities agree, however, that the basic root of these motives is fear. Of all Earth's creatures, only man is aware of the fact that someday he must die. The average man wants life, he wants it more abundantly, and he wants it now. When this life is threatened or seems in danger of ending through sickness or disease, the drive for self-preservation causes the sufferer to seek a cure, any cure. Through faddism, fraud, deception, and delusion, the unknowing are led to seek non-existent shortcuts to health. Knowing only what they're told by these super salesmen, millions of persons each year attempt self-medication for self-diagnosed symptoms. Others, some with confirmed illnesses, are beguiled with assurances of a quick cure, even for incurable diseases. Medicine can't always give such assurances. The quack, unhindered by ethics or concern, can. As I said earlier, quackery can negate the good that medicine can do. It can steal precious time. That early period of a disease when prompt, efficient treatment can often mark the difference between life and death. The cancer patient who infuses himself with expensive surefire cures, ranging from seawater to alleged new drugs, is in reality only withholding from himself surgery, chemotherapy, or radiation that might arrest the disease. Quackery also can mask disease symptoms with telling effect. The non-prescription potion that soothes a persistent stomach upset may serve only to delay a trip to the doctor by a man with an unknown ulcer, a delay that often fosters serious consequences. How can a quack be spotted? There are 6 simple indicators. 1, he uses a special or secret formula or machine that he claims can cure disease. 2, he promises a quick or easy cure. 3, he advertises using case histories or testimonials to impress people. 4, refusing to accept the tried and proven methods of medical research and proof, he clamors constantly for medical investigation and recognition. 5, he claims medical men are persecuting him or that they are afraid of his competition. 6, he claims that his method of treatment is better than surgery, x-rays, or drugs. Quackery is more than just quacks themselves. It includes, to name just a few of the broad areas, the use of unproven drugs, worthless devices, and treatment regimens. All of these areas fall within the purview of the Department of Investigation of the AMA, and I'd like to sample a few of them with you this morning. First, let's look at drugs, specifically 2 so-called drugs recently involved in 2 of the most fertile fields for quackery, cancer and arthritis. News articles appearing in the public press recently told about a cancer vaccine developed by Rand Development Corporation of Cleveland. The news stories contain glowing reports about the substance, one nationally circulated magazine headlining it as a cancer cure. Physicians across the country, asked by their patients about the so-called vaccine, began relaying their inquiries to the Department of Investigation. Cancer patients also began inquiring. We discussed the situation with the Cleveland Academy of Medicine, the local medical society, with the Ohio State Medical Association, and in the process of checking for information with the American Cancer Society and the Food and Drug Administration. The Cleveland Academy of Medicine conducted a thorough investigation, found that the vaccine had not been subjected to proper scientific research and testing, and warned publicly that its use in human beings is, quote, completely unwarranted. The Medical Society's report was given wide distribution by the AMA. The Food and Drug Administration also acted. It first went into federal court and obtained a temporary injunction against interstate shipment of the substance. Then, after another long and, I might say, quite revealing federal court hearing, the manufacture and distribution of the substance both were banned. Rand simply had refused to abide by the rules established by Congress in marketing a drug. Hundreds of cancer sufferers from all over the world had gone to Cleveland to get the substance or had obtained it through illegal interstate shipment. Each of them was, in effect, as the court pointed out, delaying proper medical care and relying on another unproven cancer substance. The actions of the Cleveland Academy of Medicine first, and then the forthright legal steps taken by the FDA, stopped what could have been another Crobiazin fiasco. Then there's dipyrone, another drug situation, this one involving arthritis. Arthritis sufferers in at least 5 southern states had obtained the drug from a Mexican physician at Piedras Negras, across the border from Eagle Pass, Texas. Some brought back ampules of the drug, unlabeled of course, from Mexico and asked their physicians to inject it. Again, the inquiry started coming in, and we began searching for answers. It was estimated that as many as 2,000 persons in one north-central Louisiana area alone were using the drug as an arthritis cure. A congressman was involved in this one too, and I hasten to add that he helped clean up the situation after he had learned the facts. The FDA was able to get some of the unlabeled ampules and reported that analysis showed it was the drug dipyro, a pain-killing substance which is not approved in this country as a treatment for arthritis. The drug has some very serious side effects, principally a granulocytosis, a blood disease in which the white blood cell count drops rapidly and infection follows. In the southern states, the FDA said it had proof that at least 4 treated persons had died, 2 from a granulocytosis. I'm sure there were many others that were not proven. The AMA, the FDA, and the congressman all issued public warnings to the public, and I'm happy to say the across-the-border traffic of arthritis sufferers has subsided. One interesting sidelight, at the time we started the investigation of this man, he was charging $5 an ampule. At the end of the investigation, he was charging $100 an ampule. Then there are devices, a fertile field for quackery since time began. George Washington, for example, once bought a pair of metallic tractors, simple metal rods that were supposed to draw out disease and illness. I could talk for hours on this field, but let's confine ourselves to just one device in the very popular field of taking off pounds effortlessly. I believe most intelligent people know that the only way to reduce is to take in fewer calories in your diet than your body uses up. But the blandishments of the quacks with their regimen pills, their special diets and devices are terribly appealing. After all too long a time and hundreds of letters to us, the government recently obtained a permanent injunction barring interstate distribution of a gadget that was supposed to take off pounds effortlessly. It had a variety of names: Figure Care, Figure Matic, Figure Magic, Figure Tone, and Isotron, for example. I'm sure you've seen ads for them around the country. The gadget sent electric currents into the body through pads applied to the skin, causing an intermittent contraction of muscles. It did not take off pounds effortlessly. Then there's the fertile field of literature and advertising, which Dr. Sinovich specifically asked me to include. Topics pertaining to health and medicine have attracted a growing number of American readers in recent years. This is a real healthy situation. The increase in books, magazine articles, and newspaper columns published on health matters is truly amazing. Fortunately, recognized professionals in the fields of medicine and health have written or edited most of these books and articles. The public is instructed and educated by such useful health guides from authoritative sources. Some of these books and articles, however, present spurious health information or information that at best must be considered questionable. It is this portion of published material, even though it is small in relation to the total output, that is of concern to us. Constitutional freedom of the press and expression is guaranteed in the First Amendment. It is a privilege that we would not want curtailed, despite our concern on occasion with the objectionable or unorthodox health views expressed by writers who are not qualified in the areas they write about. While books and articles traditionally have been the vehicle of expression of unorthodox viewpoints, and we respect this freedom, regulatory scrutiny properly is focused on some of the advertisements and promotions aimed at the commercial sales of writing on health topics to the general public. Therapeutic claims in the advertisements promoting some books or articles are false or highly doubtful. The authors and or promoters deceive the public. Their claims go beyond and abuse the concept of freedom of the press, the First Amendment. Several recent actions are examples. Most of you are familiar, I'm sure, with the best-selling book, Calories Don't Count, of a few years ago. 2 million copies of it were sold to weight-conscious Americans who wanted an easy way to shed pounds without the self-discipline of dieting. Sales hit their peak in 1961 and 62. The United States District Court in Brooklyn, New York, was the scene of the most recent in the lengthy Calories Don't Count sequence of events. Just last June, Dr. Herman Tower, author of the book, was fined a total of $7,000 by a federal judge on charges of mail fraud, conspiracy, and violation of the federal drug regulations. Dr. Tower is a Romanian-born obstetrician who has specialized in the treatment of obesity in recent years. His book recommends the using of safflower oil tablets for weight reduction. Government prosecutors charged that these claims, when used in connection with the promotion and marketing of CDC, calories don't count capsules, constituted a worthless scheme foisted on a gullible public. The government charged that Dr. Tower tied the promotion of his book with the sale of the CDC capsules, and a federal jury agreed with the charge. The defense by Dr. Tower's attorney was that Dr. Tower was a simple man taken in by the promoter. It was the tie-in of the book with the CDC tablets, not the book itself, that resulted in the heavy fine for Dr. Tower. The United States Attorney in charge of the case emphasized in a post-decision interview that Calories Don't Count, the book, was not involved in the ruling, except that part of the book used in the insertions and labeling in the cartons of CDC capsules that had been shipped interstate. Earlier, 3 men and 2 firms connected with the Calories Don't Count capsules had pleaded guilty to government charges of misbranding and mail fraud. Late in 1965, they were given $1,000 fine and suspended jail terms. Involved were officers of Cold Vitamin and Pharmaceuticals Incorporated, makers of the CDC capsules, and its subsidiary, CDC Incorporated. It's pretty obvious they were trafficking on the title of Dr. Tower's book, Calories Don't Count. They even named the capsule CDC. During the trial, it was disclosed that Dr. Tower had received a percentage of the profits from the manufacture of CDC pills. In 13 of its 20 editions, the book Calories Don't Count mentioned Cold Vitamins as a source for the diet pills. More than $500,000 worth of the CDC safflower oil capsules were sold during the 8 months they were marketed before the FDA charged they were misbranded and ordered their seizure. In another case, the Federal Trade Commission took action just last June 30th against exaggerated and flamboyant advertising for 2 publications published by Rodale Press Incorporated of Manus, Pennsylvania. The FTC ordered Rodale to discontinue false claims that readers would gain therapeutic benefits, which even the 2 publications themselves did not profess to provide. The 2 publications were titled, quote, The Health Finder and, quote, How to Eat for a Healthy Heart, and This Pace is Not Killing Us. The opinion by one FTC commissioner emphasized that respondents falsely advertised that readers of the Health Finder would add years to their lives, gain more energy, effectuate savings on medical and dental expenditures, feel better than ever, gain and maintain health, find the answers to all health problems, prevent the common cold, ulcers, fatigue, goiter, high blood pressure, cancer, infantile paralysis, and mental illness, prevent and cure all types of constipation, and prevent, treat, and relieve tuberculosis, heart disease, and arthritis. And that readers of How to Eat for a Healthy Heart, and This Pace is Not Killing Us, would be able to prevent, treat, and relieve all types of heart disease. Another FTC commissioner concurred in the results and filed a separate statement, but a third commissioner dissented and filed his own opinion. He commented that, quote, Although purporting to be directed only at the advertising, the proceeding necessarily involves an inquiry into the truth or falsity of the book. It abridges the freedom to express views or theories, no matter how unorthodox, whether they be communicated in a book, an advertisement, or any other form of publication. In our answering inquiries directed to our Department of Investigation about Rodale Press, we customarily have pointed out that we do not regard their publications as a reliable source of health information. These examples illustrate 2 of the 3 ways in which literature containing false or fraudulent claims may be limited. In the Calories Don't Count case, the book served as labeling for a product. Claims were made that could not be supported and substantiated scientifically. In the Rodale Press case, the FTC majority held that advertising falsely promised health results that the 2 books were incapable of fulfilling. A third way of limiting such publication lies in postal laws. Literature sent through the mails must be subject to regulations governing fraud if it can be proved that the promoter willfully disseminated material he knew or should have known to be false and misleading. There is no general rule that distinguishes the scientifically founded book from that promoted by a quack or a health hustler. However, questionable or false books often are written by persons without professional qualifications. They seek to promote a particular, often unorthodox, and sometimes harmful point of view. Generally, they are advertised with extravagant claims to cure or the promotion of secret remedies. Many of these publications advocate the use of products and medications not customarily prescribed by reputable physicians. How can the layman judge if the publication he is reading contains some medical opinion? It is best for the average person to rely on standard critical appraisals of books in this area. Many national health organizations have available reliable lists of resources pertaining to their particular field, and these can be obtained by writing to the organization. The Journal of the AMA in 1965 reprinted an article from an earlier science magazine on how to distinguish between crackpot work and good science in published material. The article was titled A Measure for Crackpots, and the author, F.J. Grunberger, outlined a checklist to which he had assigned point values totaling 100 for weighing the worthwhile attributes of published articles. I have stolen this from Mr. Grunberger. I think it's real fine, and I think it's sort of a fun little test. This checklist may help you in your own evaluation. The 13 items to be checked are: 1, public verifiability. He has assigned 12 points to this one. The scientist says, I did thus and so and observed its effect. You are free to repeat my steps. The crackpot often says, this is revealed truth. Sorry, but I and my followers are the only ones who can obtain these results. 2, predictability. 12 points is assigned to this one. To what extent can the technique or science being advocated be applied to the future? When a man can predict and the predictions turn out to be true, a great deal has been gained toward credibility. Number 3, controlled experiments, to which he is assigned 13 points. This item has been assigned the greatest weight on the list. The scientist seeks to devise controlled experiments if he can. The crackpot, on the other hand, often seeks to avoid controlled experiments, or if some are performed, he may invent marvelous excuses to explain why they did not bear out his theories. 4, Occam's razor, 5 points. This is a principle that of 2 possible explanations for the same phenomenon, scientists prefer the simpler. In other words, the one with the fewer hypotheses. It is not a stringent test, but it is a point to consider. Number 5, fruitfulness, 10 points. Fruitful in this concept means an ability to suggest new ideas, new approaches, and new tests, rather than the practical or material results. The argument is that the more scientific a subject is, the more it tends to lead to fruitful results. Number 6, authority, 10 points. Weight of authority tells. Among scientists, it is equivalent to building up credit. Each new subject that claims the mantle of science is supposed to be submitted immediately to known and recognized scientists for both opinion and test. 7, ability to communicate, 8 points. Most scientists soon discipline themselves in accepted methods of communications with their colleagues, their cohorts, and the public. The crackpot scorns accepted channels. Open-mindedness, 5 points. This test as a discriminator is not strong. Some persons judged in time to be true scientists were stubborn and pig-headed in their early days. In general, however, the scientist tends to use such phrases as, it appears that, and it would seem plausible. The crackpot is generally dogmatic and arbitrary. Humility, 5 points. This is a minor point, perhaps, excuse me, but we expect a scientist to tend toward humility. To be sure, there are and will be arrogant scientists. We try to forgive them, but the very act of forgiving implies that the test exists. The Fulton non sequitur. This is a negative test. The true crackpot can frequently be spotted on this test alone. He argued he argues, they laughed at Fulton, he was right. They're laughing at me, therefore I must be an equal genius. Paranoia, 5 points. This is another negative test. Lack of paranoia characteristics even earns the point. Again, the crackpot may sometimes be spotted on this test alone. Dollar complex. This is another negative test. The crackpot almost always is overly impressed with the value of his discoveries. They're earth-shaking. While this test is somewhat related to the humility aspect, it is different enough to rate its own 5 points. Statistics compulsion, 5 points. Seems to be a characteristic of crackpot literature that statistics are not only used but continuously explained. The crackpot is fascinated to discover that a coin tossed 1,000 times doesn't necessarily fall heads 500 times. He is compelled to tell the reader, sometimes on every page, the probability of having 523 heads. The scientist who knows his statistics generally assumes that his reader is informed. He seldom ends the sentence with an exclamation point. This checklist is not meant to be an absolute guide. It merely offers 13 items that an author scientist thought worthy of waiting in order to form a judgment on whether the book or article is the work of a scientist or an off-target crackpot. Thank you very much.